Welcome to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. Probably not having a great day if you've been following the news and you haven't been living under a rock, but I'm going to make your day a little bit better. We are joined by a very, very special guest today, Ray McGovern. It's an honor to have you here. Ray McGovern, if you don't know, former CIA analyst turned political activist who is telling the truth when it comes to all of the major conflicts going on across the world, false flags, geopolitical analysis. He co-founded Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, and I am very honored to have him here today. So, Mr. McGovern, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jackson. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I have to ask off the bat, what are your thoughts? I'm going to be releasing this in about 3 hours. We'll be uploading this episode. So assuming Iran has not launched their attack yet, what are your thoughts on the Israeli attack on Iran and Iran's lack of response thus far?
Well, I think it's a sure thing that Iran will respond. And Iran has demonstrated the ability to hit deep inside Israel because it has hypersonic missiles. Those things cannot be defended against by any Patriot batteries or any other air defense systems. So there's going to be damage to Israel. Now, the question is why Israel did that just now. The timing seems to depend on Netanyahu's political position. The fact that he almost lost office just a couple of days ago with the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, almost voting him out, and that if he loses office, he loses his freedom. You go to jail. Okay, I mean, that's a terrible thing to say about somebody that would almost start or maybe risk a regional war just to stay out of jail. Oh my God, this is the guy who was doing genocide in Gaza. I mean, how worse can you be? So I think that plays a large role here. And what President Trump does now is really key. Will he cooperate with the Russians as he asked the Russians to cooperate on Iran last time he and Putin spoke? Will the Russians and the Chinese, who depend heavily on Persian Gulf oil, will they do something to restrain Netanyahu? Because in the final analysis, Netanyahu has nuclear weapons, okay? He's got about 200 or so, most people think. Will he use them? Oh my God. I would say, well, that's the Samson option. That pulls down the temple right over you, too. But this is a guy who, as I'm saying, doing genocide, and we are enabling that to my great shame as an American citizen. Okay, it's a fellow who started this war with Iran now, killing a lot of their leadership already and trying to damage their nuclear facilities. So I don't rule it out. So what needs to happen now is we, the American citizens, need to rise up and say, look, Mr. Trump, restrain this guy. Whether he told you or not beforehand, whether you let him do this or not, stop him now before we're all involved in a major regional war. Last thing I'll mention, Jackson, is that we still have several tens of thousands of troops in the area. They are vulnerable. They're almost like pawns, There are people in our government, we'd like to see them shut up so that there'll be another casus belli, a reason for war against Iran. So, and Iran and its terrorist allies. So we're in quite a fix here, and Trump has got to deal with this. And I just hope that his more sensible instincts prevail, because he can, as Rubio, the Secretary of State, has already done, dissociate himself for this. But so far, he's not doing a very good job of that.
What do you think happened to those nuclear sites? Because there's been some conflicting reports as to whether or not there may be radioactive and or chemical, impacts, leakage from the Natanz plant. It's just been hit a third time, I believe. And Israel said that they're going to continue this operation for about 2 weeks.
Well, Jackson, that's one of the questions here that the preliminary Russian statement raised. You know, the IAEA, the International Agency for Energy, for Nuclear Energy Inspections is what they are, a UN agency. They have not been very dependable. They have always taken Israel's side on these things. Even more recently, their board of governors have said, "Oh, we've discovered new secret stuff that the Iranians are doing." You can't depend on them, but they are on site there. And what the Russian statement said is, "My God, Grossi is the name of the fellow who heads up the IAE. Are you not concerned about your own people? What do you hear about radiation? You know, what are you going to report now? Are you going to just shove this under the table?" So the Iranians, well, Press TV is their international broadcast system. They asked me to come on a couple of days ago when they were advertising having filched out through human spies detailed plans that the Israelis have about nuclear stuff. Well, you know, I said to them at Press TV, I said, look, the first thing you have to do is have these things authentic, have them made authentic by independent observers, not the IAEA. You've had bad experience with them.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's had bad experience with them since there was one good guy, and I'll just mention this because it's really interesting. His name was El Baradei, and he was an Egyptian, and he was a serious guy. And when all these stories that Dick Cheney was propounding about a yellow cake uranium in deepest Darfur Africa, Niger, well, he looked on Google and he had a staff look on other things. And in 2 days, they found out, as he reported to the UN Security Council, my people and I have decided that it's very clear that these reports are not authentic. So that was before the attack. We went ahead anyway, all right? They were inauthentic. They were conjured up. We know they were forgery. So anyhow, we have a new guy, but the new guy is much less independent. And so the Iranians are between a rock and a hard place. They're pretty cautious people, but this kind of thing they can't tolerate. And they have the means to retaliate. I know they will. The question is how far they'll go and how far Israel will go in retaliation for the retaliation.
Mm-hmm. And that leads me into my next question. Obviously Pezeshkian comes out of the reformist camp in Iran. When he defeated Jalili, that was an interesting election outcome. But, you had very clear indication that the U.S. was in on the game insofar as the negotiations recently being a ruse. You also had Saudi Arabia and Jordan, who participated in, I guess you could say, the defense of Israel. They were patrolling the Yemeni border. There were some drones, maybe from Iran, maybe from Iraqi militias that were intercepted on their way to Israel. Do you think that Iran, at this point, with this leadership, could amount to, I guess, the heightened level of a response of targeting U.S. assets or oil and gas assets of all these Arab Gulf families?
Well, that's a real risk. It's an intolerable risk unless you want to get the UN, unless you want to get the US involved actively in support of Israel. Now, I talked about these people being pawns. There are what, 4,000 in each northern Iraq and northern Syria. What the hell are they doing there? Well, my theory is that the neocons, the people who support Israel up to the hilt, would just as soon have some of those people killed. Some of them have said precisely that. You kill some Americans, okay? And those Americans are sitting ducks, for God's sake. You kill some Americans, we're in there big time, besides our friends Israel. Now, Jackson, one thing that your audience probably should know, and maybe don't, so it's so important, I'm going to mention it. All this business about we can't let Iran get a nuclear weapon, okay? Wow. Well, as you probably know, they're pushing at an open door, okay? In 2007, my former colleagues in the assessment part of the CIA, together with other agencies, decided in a formal national intelligence estimate that, and I quote, Iran stopped working on a nuclear weapon at the end of 2003 and has not resumed work on a nuclear weapon, unanimously by 16 agencies at that time and expressed with high confidence. Whoa! What was the effect of that? It prevented George Bush and Dick Cheney from starting a war on Iran the next year as they went out into 2008. Okay? That's what they intended. And this estimate, an honest estimate, and they're not, I know of no other estimates that played a huge role in preventing a war. As a matter of fact, I don't suggest you buy the book, but Bush did do some memoirs, decision points, he called it. You get it in the library. He must have written this part himself. He talked about this estimate, how it was an eye-popping estimate, his word, and how it was really unfortunate because, and I quote, it deprived me of the military option. For how could I possibly authorize a military strike on the nuclear facilities of a country, Iran, that the intelligence community says has no active nuclear weapons program, end quote. Bummer. So now that's what went down there in 2007 when we had an honest estimate. Every year since, and I say this with some pride, because it's the only trace of integrity left, even in the assessments part of the CIA. To their credit, every year since, to as recently as 3 months ago, they reiterated that Iran is not working on a nuclear weapon. So why the hell is our country saying we have to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon when we know damn well they're not working on one? Not only are they not working on one, but they have a religious edict against doing that. Now, you and I might say, well, that's like an encyclical. It doesn't really matter. But no, the people in Iran take that seriously. So that's the supreme indignity or the supreme irony here. They're pushing at an open door. Iran's not working on a nuclear weapon. It has to do with something else. And in my view, it has to do about 75% with Netanyahu's need to stay in office so he doesn't end up. They provided a bridal suite in the jail in Tel Aviv, and he and his wife are going to land there if he's removed from office. So will he start a regional war? Well, I think he has just now. Would he use nukes? My God, I hope he doesn't, but I can't rule it out.
It's hard to imagine what the game plan would be for Netanyahu other than what you just mentioned. And that, of course, Iran is a likely target because they defend Palestine and they are the head of the axis of resistance. But you got to wonder if they don't have a nuke because there's a fatwa against it and there's no evidence that they have one. If they're just using this uranium for civilian purposes, 3.67% enrichment, and they have restrictions on their enriched uranium stockpiles. What is the goal of all of this? Because on top of that, you have the more liberal reformist section of power in Iran that's already in charge. So the idea of having some sort of regime change kind of already is in that position right now. I don't know what else they could want politically speaking. Is it just complete destruction of Iran and their economy?
Yeah. I mean, Iran is the last regional state that could conceivably pose a threat to Israel. The Israelis see it that way, okay? Now, this business about uranium enrichment, that was all taken care of in the JCPOA, the Iran deal that was done under Obama. It was an artful thing. It was negotiated for 3 years, for God's sake, and Trump got out of it. Why? Because John Bolton said, yeah, we gotta get out. I mean, hello. So now that was then. Now, what about now? Now we have a Russian proposal. Look, we'll take some of the uranium. So if you're worried about enrichment, give it to us. We'll keep it for safekeeping. You can only enrich a little bit up to, so you take care of your medical reactors and so forth against cancer. Yeah, we'll do that. And Israel, no, can't do that. And the IAEA there's no help on this, and neither is the U.S. So there have been reasonable proposals. To the degree there are real concerns that the Iranians would enrich up to 90% or whatever it is, well, I can understand people, but if they're not working on a nuclear weapon, it doesn't it doesn't really matter. You need to be able to have something to put the uranium in and fire it into Israel. They're not working on that. So, it's a bum rap they're getting. It's an open door people are pushing, and people should recognize that. You don't find that in the New York Times or the Washington Post. That's the other side of the story. People are intended to knee-jerkedly support Israel, and in this particular instance, Israel is not deserving of any such support, the more so since they just last night started a regional war.
How do you think Russia views all of what's going on right now? The foreign ministry came out today and said, this is a very bad development, gross violation of the UN Charter, especially when we were so close to a breakthrough diplomatically. How do you think they view it in light of their negotiations with the United States right now? The same U.S. that presumably lied about these new Iran talks.
Well, Jackson, you asked the right question here. Very interesting. At the end of this statement, I think I have the same statement here. They say all the things about violating international law and calling on the parties to exercise restraint. They don't criticize the United States as being a part of this, okay? And they end up this way. In this context, we note that the U.S. is ready to hold another round of talks with Iran on the latter's nuclear program. They're going to hold those talks in Oman, and they're due to start the sixth session of such talks on this Sunday. So, what are the Russians trying to do? They're saying, "Well, my God, we hope, as they say here, we hope we know the U.S. is ready to resume these talks. We hope Iran will reciprocate in Oman." And this would be a kind of safety valve here to figure out, what the U.S. position on all this really is, whether it's the neocons. We're dealing with a very divided government in Washington. That has to be said. Sometimes Trump has good instincts, as in Ukraine, and he has placed absolute priority on having a decent relationship with Russia. Now, that's the backdrop. That's the atmosphere. Those are the things that matter. That's why you can explain, for example, why when the Ukrainians hit those bomber bases deep inside Russia, what did the Russians say? Nothing. They chose to focus on the blowing up of bridges by MI6 as terrorist acts. They said nothing about the hits on these bombers. Now, these are part of the strategic triad, and Western analysts have been picking apart Russian nuclear doctrine to a fair. They went, "Oh my God, it says right here that this would justify using." But it takes two to tango. The Russians have said absolutely nothing about that. What I'm saying here is that for whatever reason, and I don't pretend to understand it, Trump and Putin want to do a decent relationship now, want to thaw in this new Cold War, and that's the pervasive reality here. Now, Iran will play into that. Why Trump suggested to Putin during their last talk that, we really need your help. We appreciate your help with Iran. Well, Israel was not interested in that. And now they've done this preemptive thing, which I think Trump may be able to persuade the Russian leaders. Look, I really didn't know what was going on here. I told Netanyahu several times, 3 times in the last week, not to do it. He did it anyway. There's plausible deniability there because the Israelis do things without asking prior permission. They'd much rather ask for latter forgiveness.
Well, it puts Trump in a bad place no matter what, right? Whether you have Israel that went rogue, that puts him in a bad place. He looks like he doesn't know what's going on, or either that or he did know what's going on and he lied about it the whole time, including to Russia, right? But you think maybe there's some legitimate, plausible deniability?
I think there is. As I say, the Israelis don't tell us everything. I think the most operative factor here, Jackson, is that it's a very divided government that
Hmm.
Trump is trying to preside over. Now, let me just cite one thing that would seem maybe extraneous. The director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, took it upon herself 2 weeks ago to make a video. What does the video say? The video says, look, there are people that are pushing for nuclear war. They think they can use these little nukes. And here I am. She went to Japan, okay, and released this thing. Look, for God's sake, remember what happened in 1945, for God's sake. This is crazy. Now, that was a unique statement. Unique in the sense that no director of national intelligence has either gratuitously made a kind of a policy posture pronouncement like that. So why'd she do it? Because she's daily battling with people that like, maybe General Kellogg or other people who are unreconstructed Zionists. I mean, that's why Trump had to pick them for his cabinet. And she's doing battle with them, and she's trying to remind the world what the stakes are here. So I see that as very significant. Uh, Also, of course, today in retrospect, when we see the Israelis take it off here, and the Israelis having nuclear weapons, and if you talk about Trump being unpredictable, well, that's true. Netanyahu, sort of, but if he's trying to save his own rear end from ending up in jail together with his wife, which is going to happen if he loses power, unless the Israeli judiciary becomes totally corrupted. And I don't think that will happen. Well, then he's going to do these crazy things. And, the fact that he did it 2 days before the U.S. was going to talk with the Iranians for the sixth time and make some sort of arrangement, hopefully. Well, he was going to preempt that. He did. And, on the ground, my specialists tell me that it's really well nigh impossible to destroy the really deep down important centrifuges, which are deep down half a mile underground. You can't destroy them even with a nuclear weapon, people tell me. So what has happened? Well, a lot of people have been killed. That's important. These are
Mhm.
these are top leadership, and a lot of facilities have been damaged, and there may be some fallout. We should have the IAEA people on the scene report on that, for God's sake. But I think that in the next couple of days there is a silver lining here. I think that Russia will say to Trump, "Look, uh, you know, we're party with Iran. We have a treaty with them now. It's not a mutual defense treaty, but it's really strong. We're giving them all kind of weaponry, and we don't want this. We don't want them to see them go under. Okay, the Chinese, they're just as interested because they get a major share of their oil and gas from the Persian Gulf. So let's all get together and see if we can rein in this renegade who has shown himself not only able and willing to do these kinds of things. But first and foremost, Jackson, and what bothers me most as an American citizen, is the genocide. Now, I'll just add that I was born before World War II. I was real little, okay? But I learned right quick when I was in my early teens what genocide was, okay? And I said to myself, my God, when I get big, I would do anything possible to prevent that. Now I'm big, Jackson. I'm old, but I've seen it before, and it can't happen again, particularly if my government is making it possible for Israel to do these things. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but I'm doing everything I can to expose this heinous, heinous activity where people not only being bombed to death, but starved to death. I forgot if it weren't for two of my Irish great grandfathers escaping forced starvation, I wouldn't be here to talk to you today. So I know a little bit about what that's like, and I just find it so heinous as to be inconceivable, impossible for me to understand as an American citizen. We have to get out there and make sure that we Americans don't really think this kind of thing should be tolerated.
I agree with you 100%. And fortunately, thanks to the work that you're doing and so many others are doing, we have, for the first time, the majority of Americans, 53%, that say they have a disapproval rating of Israel. So it's not enough, but very reassuring that people are beginning to have their eyes open. Mr. McGovern, I can't let you leave here without asking you one last question that I'm trying to wrap my head around still. I listened to your interview with Press TV the other day, as you mentioned, where you talked about this what Iran is calling a very high stakes intelligence operation, where you had the Iranian agents go in and Israeli security networks and purportedly get these nuclear secrets out of Israel. And I've seen some of the documents. Not all the documents are released. The stories seem plausible thus far. But two things happened that were very odd. Number one, in the documents, Iran claims that Israel is helping a certain undisclosed European nation develop a nuclear bomb. That's thing number one. Number two is in the attacks this morning, the IDF has uploaded some albeit very grainy and black and white footage of what they claim is an inside job in Iran. They had some sort of what reminded me of the Ukrainian attack in Russia, Operation Spiderweb. They had some sort of a drone attack from within Iran that was launched before and during the first wave of Israeli attacks on Iran last night. What do you make of these two things? And as for the first one, do you believe that undisclosed European nation could be Ukraine?
Gosh, I hadn't been aware of that. I hadn't read those documents. Could it be Ukraine? Well, all I can say on that is nothing. I would not rule out anything with respect to Ukraine. They are in dire straits. They would, and they do have a long-standing relationship with Israel and the Israeli intelligence services. I'm remembering that right before the so-called special military operation, it was Zelensky himself at a conference in Munich who said, look, the West, the Russians have violated the agreement we had when we took away we gave up our nuclear weapons. We're entitled. We're going to get them now, and that was actually, admittedly, on the part of the Russian leaders, that was part of the catalyst. Oh my God, these guys are trying to get nuclear weapons. It's not going to happen. Okay. So yeah, it could be Ukraine. I can't really think of it. I mean, the French and the British already have them. Yeah, I suppose. Good thinking, Jackson. I know where you can get a job if you want to be an analyst.
Very, very scary times. Well, Ray McGovern, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate everything that you do. I've obviously been following you for years, so thank you so much. It's a great honor to speak with you. Is there anywhere you'd like to shout out where I'm sure most people know where to follow along with you, but if they don't know, so people can check out your work moving forward?
Yes, thanks. My son, who runs my website, berates me strongly when I forget to mention that I have a website. Okay, it's really hard to remember. RayMcGovern.com. Now,
Very good.
my normal practice is to put something on X, right? Reduce it, we're down. And then I give it to my son, and he probably the same day or the next day will put it on my website. So people who don't do X, they could go to my website. I'm also on Facebook, and I guess I'm all over YouTube. So especially on Judge Napolitano's show,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm going to go on this afternoon at 4 o'clock. So, yeah, there are all kinds of ways to get what I'm thinking. I'm just really hoping that people realize that this burgeoning relationship between Russia and the United States is very, very delicate. There are people within our administration that are trying to sabotage it. Probably people in Moscow as well. I think Mr. Putin sees a window of opportunity where he can deal with a president who is very much unlike Biden and who will talk and have his secretary of state talk to his foreign minister. So that's the hope. Then could they be dashed if the U.S. Is going to be party to this war in Iraq on Iran? Well, Iran has a treaty with Russia, and as I say before, I think there's a silver lining here. This need not get completely out of hand if China and Russia, together with the United States, rein Netanyahu in before he does something even more evil and even more nuclear. May God help us. So thanks for having me on, Jackson. Thanks for letting me carry on at this length.
Thank you so much.